Dr. Elena Martinez wiped sweat from her forehead as she climbed through the dark tunnel. The air was thick and smelled like old metal. Behind her, Captain Jake Thompson held a bright light that cut through the darkness. "Are you sure about this?" "Elena?" Jake asked. His voice echoed in the narrow space. "These ruins have been dead for thousands of years." Elena nodded without looking back. "The energy readings don't lie, Jake. Something is still active down here." They had found the ruins 3 days ago on a small planet at the edge of the Kepler Nebula. The human research ship Independence was supposed to be mapping new star systems. Instead, they discovered something that made Elena's blood run cold. The tunnel opened into a huge room. Ancient writing covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Strange symbols glowed with a soft blue light. In the center of the room stood a massive stone tablet, cracked but still readable. "My God," Elena whispered. She pulled out her scanner and began recording everything. "Jake, look at this." Jake moved closer, his light reflecting off the glowing symbols. "What does it say?" Elena worked quickly, her translation software processing the ancient language. "It's a warning. A desperate warning." Her voice grew quiet as she read. "They're called the Void Seekers. They feed on life itself, draining everything until nothing remains." "Who wrote this?" Jake asked. "A civilization that died fighting them. They managed to lock the creatures away, but barely." Elena's hands shook as she continued reading. "The seals are weakening. Time is running out." Jake stepped back. "You mean these things are still alive?" "According to this, yes. Sleeping, but alive." Elena looked up at him, fear clear in her eyes. "And the ancient seals that keep them trapped are failing." They spent 6 hours in the ruins, recording everything. The more Elena translated, the more frightened she became. The Void Seekers were not just monsters. They were intelligent. They learned. They adapted. And they were incredibly hungry. Back on the Independence, Elena worked day and night to understand what they had found. The ancient records were clear. The Void Seekers had destroyed hundreds of worlds before being stopped. The civilization that defeated them had sacrificed everything to build the prison that held them. "We have to warn the Galactic Empire," Elena told Jake as they stood on the ship's bridge. Space stretched out before them, filled with distant stars. "They need to know what's coming." Jake nodded. "I'll set course for Centauri Prime. The Empire Council needs to hear this." The journey to the Empire's capital took 2 weeks. During that time, Elena prepared her report. She had proof: energy readings, ancient texts, video recordings. Everything the Empire would need to understand the threat. Centauri Prime was a beautiful world. Tall crystal towers reached toward the sky. Ships from across the galaxy filled the busy space around the planet. The Empire had ruled for 10,000 years, and their confidence showed in everything they built. Admiral Lisa Cohen met them at the spaceport. She was a tough woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. "Elena, Jake, I got your message. This better be as serious as you claimed." "It is," Elena said. "Maybe more serious than we can handle." The Empire Council met in a great hall made of white stone. Representatives from dozens of species sat in tall chairs, looking down at the humans below. Chancellor Vexthil of the Zephyrians led the council. He was tall and thin, with blue skin and golden eyes that showed his contempt for humans. "Speak quickly," Chancellor Vexthil said. His voice was cold. "We have important matters to discuss." "Real matters." Elena stepped forward. She had practiced this speech, but standing before the most powerful beings in the galaxy made her nervous. "Honored Council, we have discovered an ancient threat. Creatures called Void Seekers that feed on life itself." Several council members laughed. Shard Prime 9, a crystal being from the collective, made a sound like breaking glass. More human fear-mongering. You see monsters in every shadow. This is not fear, Elena said, her voice growing stronger. This is fact. We have proof. She activated her holographic display. Images of the ruins appeared in the air above her. Ancient writings glowed with translated text. Energy readings showed the weakening seals. The civilization that fought these creatures left detailed records, Elena continued. The Void Seekers destroyed hundreds of worlds. They were only stopped by the greatest sacrifice in galactic history. Chancellor Vexthal waved a dismissive hand. Ancient fairy tales. Dead civilizations telling ghost stories. The energy readings are real, Elena insisted. The seals are failing. These creatures will break free, and when they do, enough. Chancellor Vexthal stood, his golden eyes flashing with anger. Humans have been part of this galaxy for 50 years. 50. We have maintained peace and order for 10,000 years. Do you think we cannot handle whatever boogeyman you have imagined? Admiral Cohen stepped beside Elena. Chancellor, with respect, Dr. Martinez is one of our best scientists. Her work is irrelevant, interrupted Sharp Prime 9. Humans panic at shadows. It is their nature. Other council members nodded in agreement. Elena felt her heart sink as she realized they were not listening. They had already decided humans were wrong. You want to know what I think? Chancellor, Vexthal said, walking closer to the humans. I think your species enjoys creating crises. It makes you feel important. Elena's fear turned to anger. When these creatures break free and start consuming your worlds, don't come crying to us. We will never need help from primitives like you, Chancellor Vexthal replied. The council voted. Unanimous rejection. The human data was confiscated and marked as unsubstantiated fear-mongering. Elena and her team were escorted from the building. Like criminals standing outside the Great Hall, Admiral Cohen put her hand on Elena's shoulder. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough, Elena said, watching Empire ships fly overhead. They won't listen until it's too late. Admiral Cohen's jaw tightened. Then we better start preparing. Because when this goes wrong, they'll expect us to fix it. As they walked back to their ship, Elena looked up at the crystal towers of Centauri. Prime, beautiful and proud, just like the empire that built them. She wondered if they would still be standing in a year. The ancient warnings echoed in her mind. The Void Seekers come. All life ends. Only unity can save us. But unity was the one thing the Galactic Empire would never accept with humans. 6 months had passed since the Empire Council rejected Elena's warnings. The human research ship Independence floated near the edge of human space, monitoring deep space signals. Elena spent most of her time studying the ancient data, looking for anything she might have missed. Elena, you need to see this, Captain Jake Thompson called from the bridge. His voice was tense. Elena hurried to join him. On the main screen, emergency signals flashed red across the galaxy map. What's happening? Emergency broadcasts from Zerion 7, Jake said. A Zephyrian mining colony. They've gone silent. Elena's stomach dropped. Zerion 7 was exactly where the ancient maps showed a major Void Seeker prison. When did they last report in? 6 hours ago. Standard mining report. Then nothing. Jake pulled up more data. Wait, there's more. 3 other signals just went. Dark, all in the same sector. Elena studied the positions. Her worst fears were coming true. Jake, those are all prison sites. The Void Seekers are awake. On Zerion 7, mining supervisor Keth Volume had been proud of his operation. 50,000 workers. The biggest mining complex in the sector. They were breaking production records every month. The drill had been working perfectly when it hit the strange chamber. At first, Keth Volume thought they had found a natural cave. The energy readings were unusual, but not dangerous. Or so they thought. The chamber was filled with floating black shapes. They looked like smoke, but they moved with purpose. The shapes poured out of the hole like water, spreading across the mining facility. The first worker they touched simply fell down. His body dried up in seconds, becoming nothing but dust and bones. Then the shapes moved to the next worker. And the next, Cathvolium tried to run, but the black shapes moved faster than he could. The last thing he saw was darkness reaching for him. The last thing he felt was his life being pulled away. In 30 minutes, 50,000 Zephyrians were dead. The mining complex became a graveyard of empty bones. The Void Seekers fed well that day. With each life they consumed, they grew stronger. They spread to nearby stations. Spaceships. Anything with life to offer. On the Independence, Elena watched the disaster unfold through emergency signals and sensor data. 3 mining stations, 2 research outposts, a passenger liner with 8,000 people. All gone. Jake checked. Their position. We're still 2 days away from the affected area. Good. We don't want to get close to those things. Elena pulled up her research. According to the ancient records, they can drain life from several kilometers away when they're strong enough. Communications Officer Amy Foster looked up from her station. I'm picking up Empire military chatter. They're sending the Third Fleet to investigate. Elena shook her head. They have no idea what they're facing. Admiral Zefter commanded the Third Fleet from his flagship, the mighty Starbreaker. He was proud of his ships and his crew. They had never faced a threat they could not handle. Admiral, we're approaching Zerion 7, reported his sensor officer. What do you see? Zefter asked, the mining complex is intact, sir, but there are no life signs. None at all. Zefter frowned. Take us closer. Prepare boarding teams. The boarding shuttles landed on the silent mining platform. The soldiers who stepped out found a horror beyond their imagination. Thousands of empty uniforms lay where workers had once stood. Bones and bing. Dust scattered across the ground. Sir, one soldier reported over the radio, everyone is dead, but there are no wounds. No signs of fighting. They just dried up. Before Admiral Zefter could respond, the Void Seekers attacked. Black shapes poured out of the mining tunnels, moving like living smoke. The soldiers opened fire, but their energy weapons passed right through the creatures. Fall back, Zefter ordered. All ships, open fire on those things. The Third Fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons, particle beams, fusion missiles. The weapons lit up space like a star, but the Void Seekers kept coming. They flowed around the weapons, reaching for the ships. When they touched the hull of the first cruiser, something terrible happened. The ship's lights went out. Its engines died. The crew inside screamed as their life force was drained away. Ship after ship went dark. Admiral Zefter watched his mighty fleet become floating graveyards. Only his flagship and 2 destroyers managed to escape. This is Admiral Zefter. To all Empire forces, he broadcast. Unknown entities have destroyed the Third Fleet. Weapons ineffective. Recommend immediate evacuation of the sector. On the Independence, Elena listened to the panicked reports. They're learning, she said quietly. The Void Seekers are adapting to our technology. Engineer Sam Rodriguez looked up from his workstation. Elena, I've been studying your ancient data. The old civilization mentioned something about rare earth. Elements having an effect on these creatures. What kind of effect? Elena asked. They called them disruption crystals. Certain minerals that could break up the creature's molecular structure. Sam pulled up his analysis. We have some of those elements in our storage bay. Elena felt a spark of hope. Can you test them? Already am. Amy, Can you generate that specific frequency pattern from the ancient records? Amy Foster worked at her communications console. The one that supposedly repels them? I think so. She adjusted her controls. There, broadcasting on all frequencies. Jake watched the sensor readings. The void seekers in this sector. They're moving away from us. It's working, Elena whispered. The ancient defenses still work. While the humans made their breakthrough, the Empire suffered more losses. The void seekers consumed the industrial world of Nemex Prime. 2 billion people died in a single day. The creatures grew stronger with each feeding. Emergency sessions were called on Centauri Prime. Chancellor Vextil stood before the panicked council, his usual arrogance replaced by worry. The situation is under control, he insisted. We are. Deploying the 5th and 7th fleets to contain this threat. Contain it? Shouted Representative Klixner. It's consumed 6 star systems. Our fleets can't even touch these creatures. We will find a solution, Chancellor Vextil said. The Empire has faced challenges before. Maybe we should contact the humans, suggested another representative. They warned us about this. Chancellor Vextil's face turned dark blue with anger. Never. The Galactic Empire does not bow to primitive species. We will handle this ourselves. But privately, some Empire officials were not so proud. Commander Ryan Bailey received a secret message at the human outpost on New Geneva. It came from a Zephyrian admiral who had lost his entire family on Nemex Prime. Please, the message said. Can you help us? We were wrong. The humans were right. Commander. Bailey forwarded the message to Admiral Cohen on Earth. Her reply was short and clear. Official policy is non-interference. They made their choice. On the Independence, Elena worked frantically to understand the Void Seekers better. Every day brought new reports of consumed worlds. Every day, the creatures grew stronger. Jake, look at this, Elena called out. She had been analyzing the pattern of attacks. They're not just feeding randomly. They're moving toward the most populated systems. Jake studied the data. They're following the ancient expansion routes. The same paths the dead civilization used 10,000 years ago. Which means ... double quotes. Elena traced the path on her star map. Her face went pale. They're heading for Centauri Prime, the Empire's capital. Amy Foster received another emergency broadcast. This time from the Battle of Meridian Gate, where an entire Empire battle fleet faced the Void Seekers. The broadcast was chaos, screaming, ships exploding. And then suddenly silence. 800 ships had gone to Meridian Gate. 3 came back. Elena, Jake said quietly, how long do we have? Elena looked at her calculations. At their current rate of expansion, 6 months, maybe less. And the Empire still won't ask for help? Elena shook her head. Their pride will kill them all. Outside the Independence, space looked peaceful. Stars twinkled in the distance. But Elena knew that behind that beauty, darkness was spreading. The Void Seekers were awake, and they were hungry. The ancient warning echoed in her mind. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be bargained with. They exist only to consume. The Empire had ignored the warnings. Now they were paying the price. The news came to Earth on a quiet Tuesday morning. President Kate Morgan sat in her office, reading reports from across human space. Admiral Lissa Cohen entered with a grim expression. Madam President, we've lost contact with 12 Empire Star systems in the last month, Admiral Cohen reported. The Void Seekers are accelerating their expansion. President Morgan looked up from her papers. She was a small woman with gray hair, but her eyes held steel. How many dead? Conservative estimate? 50 billion beings. The Empire's core worlds are evacuating. And they still haven't asked for our help? Admiral Cohen shook her head. Chancellor Vexthil issued a statement yesterday. He called the crisis a temporary setback and promised victory within weeks. President Morgan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Temporary setback. Half their empire is gone. Meanwhile, on the research ship Independence, Dr. Elena Martinez had made a disturbing discovery. The Void Seekers weren't just consuming life randomly. They were learning, adapting, getting smarter. Jake, look at this attack pattern, Elena said, pointing to her holographic display. 3 weeks ago, they just flowed over everything. Now, they're using tactics. Captain Jake Thompson studied the data. They're cutting off escape routes, surrounding their targets before attacking. It's worse than that. Elena switched to another display. They're leaving some ships intact, letting them escape to spread fear. Engineer Sam Rodriguez joined them at the display. I've been monitoring human space. The deterrent stations are holding, but I'm seeing probing attacks. They're testing our defenses. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. They know we can hurt them. They're studying us. On the human colony of New Geneva, Commander Ryan Bailey watched Empire refugee ships arrive daily. Families fleeing the advancing. Darkness. Children who had lost everything. The desperate and the terrified. Commander, his aide said, we're receiving dozens of unofficial requests for help. Empire military officers, civilian leaders. They're begging us to intervene. Ryan looked out at the refugee camp growing outside the spaceport. What's our official response? Non-interference. Direct orders from Earth. Ryan's jaw tightened. And unofficially? We keep helping refugees. And we keep recording everything. Someone needs to remember what really happened here. Back in Empire space, the situation grew worse by the day. The Void Seekers had consumed the industrial heart of the galaxy. Shipyards that had built fleets for centuries were now empty graveyards. Floating in space, Admiral Kethmer commanded what remained of the Empire's Fourth Fleet. Once, he had led 2,000 ships. Now, only 80 vessels remained. They hung in space near the abandoned world of Talos III, watching for the enemy. Admiral, his sensor officer reported, detecting movement in the asteroid field. Kethmer moved to the main display. At first, he saw nothing. Then the asteroids began to shift. Black shapes flowed between the rocks like water. The Void Seekers had found them. All ships, emergency jump, Kethmer ordered. Get us out of here. But the Void Seekers had learned. They moved. Faster now, flowing through space like a living web. They reached the fleet before the ships could escape. Kethmer watched his vessels go dark one by one. The Void Seekers drained them from the inside out, leaving empty hulks floating in space. Only his flagship and 12 others managed to jump. Away. This is Admiral Kethmer to Empire Command, he broadcast. Fourth Fleet is destroyed. Repeat, Fourth Fleet is destroyed. These creatures are no longer just feeding. They're hunting. On Centauri Prime, panic filled the crystal towers. The beautiful capital world buzzed with evacuation ships. The wealthy and powerful fought for seats on vessels heading to the outer colonies. Chancellor Vexthil stood in his private office, looking out at the chaos below. His aide, a nervous young Zephyrian named Telvik, brought him the latest reports. Chancellor, the Military Council recommends immediate evacuation of the capital, Telvik said. Absolutely not. Vexthil's golden eyes flashed. The Empire does not run from threats. Sir, with respect, 25 star systems have fallen. Billions are dead. Perhaps it's time to consider ... alternatives. Vexthil turned on his aide. What alternatives? Owing to those primitive humans? Admitting that our 10,000-year Empire needs help from species that barely understand fire? Telvik said nothing, but his expression showed what he thought. "Get out," Vextel ordered, "and send word to all remaining fleets. We make our stand here." On Earth, President Morgan called an emergency meeting of the Human Defense Council. The room was filled with military leaders, scientists, and colony representatives. "The situation is simple," President Morgan began. "The Empire ignored our warnings. They rejected our help. They called us primitives. Now they're facing extinction." Admiral Cohen stood up. "Madam President, I've been receiving unofficial requests for assistance, not from the government, but from individuals, families, children, and some of my people want to help. They say it's the right thing to do." President Morgan looked around the room. "Anyone else feel that way?" Several hands went up. Colony. Representative Mike Foster spoke first. "My daughter lives near the border. She's been treating Empire refugees. She says they're not arrogant anymore. They're just scared." Dr. Alex Stone, Elena's colleague, added his voice. "The ancient records show that defeating the Void Seekers required cooperation between species. Maybe that's the only way." President. Morgan listened to the debate for an hour. Then she made her decision. "Here's what we're going to do. Officially, we maintain non-interference. The Empire made their choice, but ... She paused. "We continue humanitarian aid to refugees. We defend our own territory, and we prepare." "Prepare for what?" Admiral Cohen asked. "For the possibility that we might be the only ones left to stop this thing." Back on the Independence, Elena made a breakthrough that changed everything. She had been studying captured Void Seeker material when she noticed something odd. "Sam, Amy, come look at this." She called out. The engineer and communications officer joined her at the science station. Elena pointed to her scanner readings. "I've been analyzing the molecular structure of Void Seeker remains. They're not just energy beings. They're partially existing in a different dimension." "What does that mean?" Sam asked. "It means our weapons pass through them because they're not entirely in our reality." But ... Elena's eyes lit up. "If we can force them fully into our dimension, we can hurt them." Amy looked at the data. "How do we do that?" "The rare earth elements Sam discovered. They don't just disrupt the creatures. They anchor them to our reality. And once they're anchored ... We can kill them," Sam finished. Elena nodded. "We can kill them." For the first time in months, hope flickered in the darkness. But they were running out of time. The Void Seekers were only weeks away from human space. Check their position. "Elena, I'm getting reports from the border colonies. Strange energy readings. The creatures are coming." Elena looked at her small team. 4 humans on a single ship against an enemy that had destroyed an empire. Then we better get to work. The galaxy is counting on us. Outside their windows, space looked empty. But Elena knew the darkness was coming. The ancient enemy was awake. And it was hungry. The only question was whether humanity could stop what the mighty Galactic Empire could not. The message arrived on Earth 3 days after Centauri Prime went dark. Chancellor Vextel was dead. The Empire's beautiful capital world was now a lifeless husk floating in space. What remained of the government had fled to the outer colonies. In the ruins of the Empire, a new leader emerged. Admiral Vexara was younger than most council members, and she had seen her entire family consumed by the Void Seekers. Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. "Send the message to Earth," she told her aide. The formal request for help arrived at President Morgan's desk that same morning. Admiral Cohen brought it personally. "They're asking for assistance," Admiral Cohen said. Finally, President Morgan read the message. Her face grew darker with each line. "Listen to this. The Galactic Empire graciously offers humanity the opportunity to prove their worth by assisting in our current difficulties. They're still trying to make it sound like they're doing us a favor, Admiral Cohen said. After losing their entire empire, they still think they're better than us. President Morgan set the message aside. Send our reply. Admiral Cohen smiled grimly. What should I tell them? Tell them exactly what I think. The human response was delivered. Within hours. Admiral Vexara read it in her makeshift command center on a mining station in the Outer Rim. Her aide watched her face change from hope to shock to despair. What do they say? The aide asked. Vexara read aloud. The United Earth Government acknowledges your request for assistance. However, we decline to participate in what you describe as proving our worth. You rejected our warnings. You called us primitives. You dismissed our evidence. Now you face the consequences alone. We will defend human space and assist refugees, but we will not risk human lives to save an empire that has shown us nothing but contempt. The aide's face went pale. They refused, completely. Vexara crumpled the message, and I can't blame them. Meanwhile, on the Independence, Dr. Elena Martinez was working around the clock to perfect her anti-void seeker weapons. The breakthrough had come when she realized the creatures existed partially in another dimension. The weapon works by creating a dimensional anchor, she explained to Captain Jake Thompson. It forces the void seekers into our reality, where they become vulnerable to conventional attacks. Engineer Sam Rodriguez held up a prototype device. I've built 12 anchoring generators, small enough to fit on fighter ships, powerful enough to trap a whole swarm. How do we test them? Jake asked. Communications Officer Amy Foster looked up from her station. We might get a chance soon. I'm detecting void seeker probes along the human border. They're testing our defenses. Elena felt her stomach tighten. They know we can hurt them. They're being careful now. Good, Jake said. Careful means they're afraid. And if they're afraid, they can be beaten. The first test came sooner than expected. A small group of void seekers attacked the human research station at Delta Centauri. The station's defenders were ready. Dr. Alex Stone commanded the station's defenses. When the black shapes appeared on his sensors, he activated Elena's dimensional anchors. Anchors online, his technician reported. The creatures are solidifying. All weapons, fire at will, Alex ordered. For the first time since the crisis began, human weapons struck their targets. Plasma bolts and particle beams tore through the anchored void seekers. The creatures writhed and dissolved, their death screams echoing across multiple dimensions. It works, Alex broadcast to all human forces. The weapons work, but the victory came with a cost. The void seekers learned from the attack. They adapted quickly, changing their approach. When they attacked the next human outpost, they came in massive numbers, overwhelming the defenses through sheer force. On Earth, President Morgan met with her military council. The situation had changed, but not necessarily for the better. The good news is we can kill them, Admiral Cohen reported. The bad news is they're learning. Each attack teaches them more about our defenses. How long before they figure out how to counter our anchoring technology? President Morgan asked. Dr. Stone, joining the meeting by video link, looked grim. Weeks, maybe less. They're incredibly adaptive. President Morgan stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the lights of the city. Normal people living. Normal lives, unaware that the galaxy was dying around them. What about the Empire refugees? She asked. Millions of them, Admiral Cohen replied, flooding our border colonies. Commander Bailey reports that New Geneva alone has taken in 200,000 beings. Are any of them useful? Scientists? Engineers? Military? Some. Many are willing to fight. They've lost everything to these creatures. President Morgan turned back to her council. Then maybe it's time we stopped thinking like humans and started thinking like the galaxy's only hope. The decision was controversial. Half of the Human Defense Council opposed it. They argued that humanity owed nothing to species that had treated them with contempt for 50 years. "Let them die," said Colony Representative Sarah Kim. "They made their choice when they laughed at our warnings." But President Morgan had made up her mind. "We're not doing this for the Empire. We're doing it because if we don't stop the Void Seekers here, humanity will be next." The announcement went out to all human forces. Operation Final Stand is now in effect. All available ships are to proceed to the battle zone. We fight not for the Empire, but for the survival of all life in the galaxy. On the Independence, Elena received the orders with mixed feelings. "Are we really doing this?" she asked Jake. "Looks like it." Orders are to join the fleet at Rigel Station. Elena looked at her research data. "Jake, I need to tell you something. The weapon isn't perfect. The dimensional anchors work, but they're temporary. And using them attracts more Void Seekers. Meaning this might be a one-way trip. If we anchor enough of them, we'll draw the entire swarm to our location." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Does the fleet know this?" "I don't think so." "Should we tell them?" Jake looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the darkness was spreading. "No, they need hope right now. We'll figure out the rest when we get there." As human ships gathered at Rigel Station, refugees continued to pour into human space. But these weren't the arrogant Empire citizens who had once looked down on humanity. These were broken survivors who had lost everything. Commander Ryan Bailey watched another refugee ship dock at New Geneva. Among the passengers was a young Zephyrian girl who reminded him of his own daughter. "Are you here to help?" the girl asked in broken English. Ryan knelt down to her level. "We're going to try. My family is gone," the girl said. "The dark things took them." Ryan felt something break inside his chest. "I know. I'm sorry. Will you stop them?" Ryan looked into her golden eyes and saw hope there. Hope that maybe the humans could do what the mighty Empire could not. "Yes," he said. "We'll stop them." As he walked away, Ryan wondered if he had just lied to a child. The Void Seekers had destroyed the most powerful empire in galactic history. What chance did humanity really have? But then he remembered something Elena had said in her original report to the Empire Council. Only unity can save us. The Empire had been too proud for unity, too arrogant to accept help, too convinced of their own superiority to listen to warnings. Humanity would be different. They had to be. The survival of the galaxy depended on it. The human fleet gathered at Rigel Station was the largest in their history. 500 ships from across human space, carrying the best weapons and the bravest crews humanity could offer. But as Fleet Admiral Lisa Cohen looked at the tactical display, she knew it might not be enough. "Admiral," her aide reported, "final ship count, 512 vessels, 200,000 crew members. And our enemy? Unknown numbers. Sensor readings suggest millions of individual Void Seekers, possibly more." Admiral Cohen nodded grimly. "Launch the reconnaissance probe. Let's see what we're really facing." The probe reached the former location of Centauri Prime 6 hours later. What it found made even veteran officers go pale. The entire system was covered in a writhing mass of darkness. The Void Seekers had grown beyond anything the ancient records described. Dr. Elena Martinez studied the probe data aboard her ship, the Independence. "Jake, look at this. They're not just feeding anymore. They're building something." Captain Jake Thompson joined her at the science station. "Building what?" "Some kind of dimensional gateway. They're trying to open a permanent passage to their home dimension." Elena's face went white. "If they succeed, billions more will pour through. How long do we have?" Elena checked her calculations. "Maybe hours. The gateway is almost complete." Jake activated the ship's communications. "All ships, This is Captain Thompson. The enemy is attempting to open a dimensional gateway. If they succeed, we're all dead. This is our only chance." The human fleet moved towards Centauri Prime with grim determination. They knew the odds. They knew most of them wouldn't be coming home. But they also knew that someone had to try. Admiral Cohen commanded from her flagship, the Liberty. Engineer Sam Rodriguez had equipped the ship with the most powerful dimensional anchors they could build. If they could force the Void Seekers into normal space, conventional weapons could hurt them. "All ships, prepare for anchor deployment," Admiral Cohen ordered. "Remember, once we activate these devices, there's no turning back. The entire swarm will come for us." Communications Officer Amy Foster, now serving aboard the Liberty, detected movement ahead. "Admiral, sensors show massive Void Seeker formations." "They know we're coming." "Good," Admiral Cohen replied. "Let them come." The battle began when the human fleet was still light minutes away from Centauri Prime. The Void Seekers poured toward them like a black tide, moving faster than any ship could travel. Anchor deployment in 3.2.1. Deploy. Admiral Cohen commanded. Across the fleet, dimensional anchors activated. Space itself seemed to shiver as reality was forced to hold creatures that existed in multiple dimensions. The Void Seekers suddenly became solid, visible, vulnerable. All weapons fire at will. Admiral Cohen ordered. The human fleet unleashed everything they had. Plasma cannons carved through Void Seeker formations. Particle beams sliced the creatures apart. Fusion missiles created brilliant explosions that lit up the darkness. For the first time since the crisis began, the Void Seekers were dying in large numbers, but they were learning, adapting, fighting back with desperate fury. The creatures' counterattack was devastating. They flowed around human ships like water, draining power from engines and life support. Ship after ship went dark there. Crews consumed by the hungry darkness. Captain Thompson watched his tactical display as red icons appeared across the fleet. "We're losing ships fast. The anchors can't hold them all." Elena worked frantically at her station. "The dimensional gateway is still growing. We need to reach it before it opens fully. How close do we need to get?" "Close enough to drop a dimensional bomb directly into the gateway's core." Jake looked at her in surprise. "A dimensional bomb? You never mentioned that before." "Because I wasn't sure it would work. And because ... Elena hesitated. "Because whoever delivers it won't be coming back." The Independents pushed deeper into the swarm, followed by the remaining ships of the human fleet. Around them, space burned with the fury of battle. Void Seekers died by the thousands, but more kept coming. Admiral Cohen's voice crackled over the communications. "This is Admiral Cohen to all ships. The gateway is within range. Prepare for final assault." But as they approached Centauri Prime, the true scope of their challenge became clear. The dimensional gateway was massive, stretching across half the system, and protecting it were the largest Void Seekers anyone had ever seen. "My God," Elena whispered. "They're the size of battleships." These ancient Void Seekers were different from the others. They moved with intelligence and purpose. They had been sleeping for millions of years, and now they were awake and angry. The first giant Void Seeker reached the human fleet and simply passed through the Liberty, draining the massive ship in seconds. Admiral Cohen's last transmission was brief. "Elena, finish this. Make them pay." With the Admiral dead, Captain Thompson took command of the remaining fleet. Only 50 ships were left, and the dimensional gateway was growing stronger by the minute. "All ships, form up on the Independence," Jake ordered. "We're going in." Elena armed her dimensional bomb. It was a simple device, really. A reverse anchor. That would collapse the gateway by forcing it completely out of their reality. but it had to be placed at the exact center of the gateway structure. "Jake, I need to tell you something," Elena said as they flew toward the gateway. "The bomb has a manual trigger. Someone needs to stay with it." Jake was quiet for a moment. "I'll do it." "No, this is my discovery, my responsibility." Elena looked at him with sad eyes. "Besides, someone needs to get the Independence home. Tell them what happened here." The remaining human ships fought their way through the Void Seeker defenses. Engineer Sam Rodriguez pushed the Independence's engines beyond their limits, racing against time as the dimensional gateway continued to expand. "Gateway. Center in sight," Sam reported. "But there are hundreds of Void Seekers protecting it." "Ram through them," Elena ordered. "We only get one chance." The Independence smashed through the Void Seeker lines, its hull taking terrible damage. Behind them, the last human ships provided covering fire, buying precious seconds. "Bomb deployment." "Position reached," Elena announced. She stood up from her station and looked at her friends one last time. "It's been an honor serving with you." Jake grabbed her arm. "Elena, there has to be another way." "There isn't. And we all know it." Elena smiled sadly. "Take care of Amy and Sam. And when you get home, tell them we stopped the darkness." Elena launched herself from the Independence in a small escape pod, carrying the dimensional bomb. Behind her, Jake reluctantly ordered the retreat. The remaining human ships limped away from the gateway as fast as their damaged engines could carry them. Elena flew her pod into the heart of the dimensional gateway. Around her, reality twisted and bent as two dimensions tried to occupy the same space. She could see through the gateway to the Void Seeker's home dimension, an empty place filled with nothing but hunger and darkness. "Not today," Elena said, and triggered the bomb. The explosion was unlike anything ever seen. Reality itself collapsed inward, dragging the dimensional gateway and everything connected to it into nothingness. And massive Void Seekers screamed as they were pulled back to their own dimension. The smaller ones simply vanished out in minutes. It was over. The Centauri system was empty, except for floating debris, and the few human ships that had survived. Jake brought the Independence home to Earth, carrying news of victory and loss. Of the 500 ships that had gone to Centauri Prime, only 12 returned. 200,000 brave souls had given their lives to save the galaxy. President Morgan met the survivors personally. "You've done something no one thought possible," she told them. "You've saved us all." In the aftermath, the galaxy slowly began to heal. A surviving Empire species approached humanity not as equals, but as grateful children seeking guidance. The old galactic order was dead, replaced by a new confederation, led by the species that had been dismissed as primitive. Commander Ryan Bailey, now promoted to Admiral, established the Galactic Defense Force, with headquarters on New Geneva. The refugee girl he had comforted became one of the first non-human cadets in the new organization. "Will there be other threats?" she asked him years later, now a young officer herself. Admiral Bailey looked out at the stars. "Probably. But next time, we'll be ready. And next time, we'll listen to the warnings." Dr. Alex Stone founded the Elena Martinez Institute for Xenological Defense, ensuring that humanity would never again allow arrogance to blind the galaxy to existential threats. The Institute's motto, carved in stone above its entrance, read, "Simply listen, learn, survive." The galaxy was safe, but the price had been terrible. Billions dead, an empire fallen, heroes lost forever to the darkness. But in the end, it was not the mighty who saved them. It was the species that others had called primitive, the ones who listened when others laughed, the ones who warned when others scorned. The humans had proven that sometimes the smallest voice carries the most important message, and sometimes those who seem weakest are actually the strongest of all. The Void Seekers were gone, But their lesson remained. Pride goes before the fall, but humility can save the galaxy.